welcome to Media Lite, where we treat each piece of media like great literature and focus in on something that matters to us right now. And tonight we are going into about the hottest topic in movies. That's right. We're going to take a little row around the wine dark sea together and talk about Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, why I like it, and why Kris loved it. Kris, are you half as excited to talk about The Odyssey as I am?
I'm possibly more excited, as you
Mm-hmm.
just established. I'm the one who loved this movie, and ever since I saw it on opening weekend, I've been like salivating over every little tidbit of conversation I can find, be it on the internet or other podcasts. Socially distanced, our friends over on the Pop Break had a beautiful conversation about this. Bill Bodkin, Bill George, friend of the pod, Dan
Yep.
Cohen, friend of the pod. The Ringerverse has covered it. I've chewed up everything I can, and I'm so excited to contribute to the conversation now.
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that. As we know, I am an English teacher. I haven't taught The Odyssey in over 15 years, but I did teach this text back in the day. I had a chance to revisit it for the first time in quite a while before watching the film, which was an absolute treat. Um,
Oh, you
I
reread
re-
it in time for the film.
I did.
You're a boss.
I finished my reread about 3 hours before I sat down in the IMAX 70 millimeter theater to get the full Nolan experience.
Nice.
Um,
Vacation time must have helped.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely helped. And I just have to say, I too deeply enjoyed this movie. It was such a thrill to see one of the greatest tales of all time on screen, to hear like every average Joe talking about it. I got to go see it with my buddy John, who is not necessarily someone who goes out of his way to celebrate literature, but he does love Christopher Nolan. He does love a good movie. So to be there, seeing this film in the best format, it was awesome. Um, I think I landed slightly lower on the film than some of my best friends in podcasting, including you. But this is by no means a condemnation of the film. I deeply enjoyed it. I'm very happy it's out there. I will likely see it again before it leaves theaters because I'm excited to give it another watch and see what hits me a little bit differently this time. Um, so our goal here tonight in this very light media light, Kris and I are both exhausted from a deep night of nostalgia on the pod last night, coming to you next week. Um, but I think I finally got my words together enough, Kris, to explain why I was lower. And it's really simple. I really liked Christopher Nolan's movie,
Mm-hmm.
but I think I walked out of the theater realizing I like the epic poem even more.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think that is probably a pretty clear dividing line. If you could interview 150 people who saw
Hmm.
this film, I'm willing to bet they'd fall into two pretty distinct buckets in terms of how much they liked or loved it based on how attached they are to the original work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's so true of anything we love. I just did a little reread and rewatch of Return of the King,
Yeah.
the most, Oscar-laden Lord of the Rings there can be, the culmination of that story. And I have to be honest, upon a rewatch, up against an immediate reread of the text, there's just no comparison.
Sure.
And it's one of those things that really it's a triumph of an adaptation. But that
Hmm.
is what it is. It's an adaptation. It is
Absolutely.
taking a story that exists in one medium and doing your damnedest to translate it to a totally different medium. And that's where I think for me, perhaps
Hmm.
because I don't have the same attachment to the source text, right, having read it like once back in school,
Hmm.
I'm watching this film, and as a film on its own terms,
Yeah.
it succeeds in spades. It succeeds wildly. It is such an entertaining film, end to end. I read some of your Letterboxd thoughts
Oh yeah. Yeah.
concerning like
Thank you.
the character of Odysseus and some of the things that you felt were missing from it based on your
Yeah.
textual experience of that character.
Yeah.
But I think taking the character as he's given to me on screen, I understand his motivations. Each of his choices makes sense within the character that I'm coming to know and to understand. And the journey he
Yeah.
goes on is so satisfying. The themes that they explore through that story are so satisfying. So yeah, I think that attachment to text is a big dividing line, probably amongst the general
Oh yeah.
audience.
All right. before we get into talking about what works in this movie, because I have a lot to say on that. Really loved the movie. Um, Even since we came up with the plan to do this little mini podcast, one thing did drop my excitement meter a little bit that just totally bummed me out because despite being slightly lower on the film than you, I walked out of the movie so energized. I was like, I want to talk about this with everyone. I want to hear what they loved. I want to hear what they didn't love. I want to offer some insights that I think they'll might enjoy or appreciate, like noodling on, thinking about.
It's a good
Um,
time for movies, for
and
sure.
then sadly, all the toxic fallout of this like Emily Wilson feud hit my feed. I had managed to avoid it for a few days. And yeah, Emily Wilson wrote this incredible adaptation of The
Yeah,
Odyssey in 2017. Gets a shout out from Christopher Nolan. That's the edition I read. I've read other editions in the past. I thought this was an excellent one. Um, and I read her review, and I don't wanna get bogged down here, but so I'll just say a couple quick things about it. Number 1, I do think that it was an incredibly immature and
yeah,
poorly thought out review of the film.
yeah.
Um, and that annoys me because I was so energized to talk to everyone about like, "Man, I love this Nolan movie. Man, I love that Emily Wilson adaptation." And now when I say the name, I feel like I'm evoking a whole toxic,
Yeah,
flood of information. So I don't wanna get bogged down in that. What I will say, if you're feeling sore about it, I think you have every right to. I do think that the tone of that review was absurd and took some needlessly big negative swings. I think it also contains some insight and some reasonable critiques that might have been well received in a very different review that was
mhm,
eager to deepen the conversation. And probably the nicest thing she has to say in her review is at the very end, she says, one great thing about this is, maybe it'll get more classics departments to be prioritizing these types of conversations. Maybe it'll get more people reading it. And Emily, if you're listening, I love your book. I'm going to rec it to people. But why would you step in and take away from that conversation that you
right.
celebrate at the end of your review? So that's all I want to say there. The other thing I want to say is because I'm going to be the voice of someone mentioning a few things I was longing for, or a few things that I thought might have heightened the film. Uh, I want to make it very clear. I do not think that I am Christopher Nolan. He is one of my favorite filmmakers in the world. I am not here to tell him who's who and what's what. Just a few thoughts. Yeah. So, Chris, tell me about why you loved this film. And I think I'm just going to yes and you because I loved so much about it.
Okay. So the refrain I keep coming back to, I've
Hmm.
repeated this a handful of times through a few different conversations. For me, this is the pinnacle
Yeah.
of cinematic storytelling, telling
Hmm.
a story in the medium of cinema and all the potential that that holds without talking about potential, quote unquote, in terms of
Yeah.
sup- supplemental technology, a 4DX theater experience with
Hmm.
that's not what I mean. I'm talking about sitting in a chair in a dark room with a big screen and quality sound and being
Yeah.
taken on a journey. This is the height of what that can achieve, in my opinion, mostly because every aspect of the production, and there are so many,
Yeah.
is full of professionals operating at the highest caliber of the craft.
Hmm.
When I look at this film, I mean, not only is it an experience in the cinema, multiple near cardiac events, whether it's the Cyclops sequence or later the battle with the suitors, the score is swelling. Maybe it's the moment where you're in Cersei's hut and she's manually molding a man's face into that of a
Hmm.
swine. You're in these
That was
moments where,
so freaking sick,
oh,
by the way, but carry
there,
on.
there are just so
That
many
was awesome.
visceral body experiences that this
Mhm.
film serves, as well as the intellectual stimulation of the story itself, of the themes
Yeah,
at play, the heartache, the turmoil of these characters. It's
yeah,
all there in spades, and it's because of first a tremendous screenplay. It blows my mind that amongst all that visual splendor, the incredible sights for your main senses to feast on, right? The
yeah.
sounds and the sights. The way he put word to page in this was writing like I didn't know Christopher Nolan was capable of.
Yep.
Specifically, the siren speech is really where the siren speech, and then when Odysseus is telling his story later as the beggar to his wife, and
Yep.
Athena is looking on, and she's weeping with him.
Yeah.
The setting that he created for that moment, everything between Athena and Odysseus to that point that makes that so full of wordless feeling and powerful emotion. It's a triumph of screenplay writing.
Yep.
Again, adapting this from a possibly insurmountable source text, right? Like, I'm sure weaker writers have failed to take this thing and make something sensible out of it, make something that people can go and sit in a cinema and feel like it's a coherent journey that never dips in its momentum, that never gets bogged down in its words, never loses its way into meandering ideas. It
Sure.
is a straight arrow for 3 hours. I can't believe how fast 3 hours went by.
Mhm.
So, I don't know, for my money, looking at the things that Christopher Nolan was willing to try in this film,
Yeah.
shooting entirely in IMAX with a specially built rig and all that, but then hoisting that 400-pound camera rig up the side of a
Yeah.
Greek mountain to a remote
Mhm.
cave so they can make this thing as authentic as possible. It's not just the ideas he has and what he's willing to go
Yeah.
for, but it's what people are willing to do with him.
Yeah.
The sacrifices they're willing to make, the hard work they're willing to put in order to operate at this level of the craft. It's that level of effort and expertise is just so tangible in the final product. It's impossible for me not to love it.
Yeah, it's wild to me that, like, only Christopher Nolan, right, could get, Zendaya on board for a part that's not a leading role, with a part that's largely looks and faces. She's a very talented actress, and I think she wrings every ounce of emotion, out of what she's supposed to do out of it. But not any director could get someone that big to step in, for that role,
Yeah.
and I think that's just absolutely remarkable.
Yeah. Convince guys to train to actually be able to row that boat on the open
Yeah,
sea for weeks ahead of actually filming. It's just
yeah.
ridiculous.
Well, I'm gonna tell you what I absolutely loved about the film,
Please
and
do.
and I think that is, like, if you're gonna tell this story now, you've gotta figure out why you are telling the
Mm,
story, because as much as I love the text, it is this spattering of often, like, conflicting Greek mythologies and customs. There are things happening at different stops along the way that even as it was first being recorded in writing, did not fully match up with everyone's lived experience. It's a little bit of a fantasy. The morality of the book is confusing, right? Like I mentioned, the Emily Wilson translation. And one thing that I find so worthwhile about reading that, if you are invested in the story, is she is so careful to like dig through the types of the types of choices she was making with the etymology of words.
mm.
Um, there's this word in the original Greek. It could mean X, Y, or Z. Here's the reason I chose this word.
Love that.
You get to see that thought process, right? And I think one of the biggest pieces in her story is she chose to identify, correctly many of like the servants in the homes as slaves, people who had been bought and sold in slavery, working in these homes, because most translations try to keep that out of it. We get servants
Yeah, I think
and things
they're
like
trying to
that.
strike that balance of like
Um,
trying to draw that common distinction. People especially have like the biblical
yeah,
argument about slavery. Well, it's not the same as the chattel slavery you're thinking of in
sure.
modern day. It's more of a like lived normal experience.
Yeah,
It's important that in the modern day we acknowledge what that experience is for a human
yeah,
being to be in servitude to another and not free. It's
yes. But the reason I bring that up, because, Christopher Nolan did not choose to go with that wording. And I'm not actually taking umbrage with that choice at all. But I love that he tried to tell a story to a certain extent about war and colonization.
mm,
We don't hear that term, but Odysseus's revelation at the end of this is that, what he is doing is selfish, it's damning, it's an act of colonization, it's an act um that's meant to inflict pain to bring power to just one side. So to see him reckon with that, in a world where we are debating the consequences of those types of actions on a daily basis,
Mhm.
I thought was really powerful. And I'm so, so, so happy that he chose to take it there
Yeah.
and move in that direction. To take that, I won't call it real because it's still kind of a myth, but this sort of like myth of were there these like seafaring tribes that
Myths,
that went
people
around
from
and
the sea.
destroy, did this really happen? Like, that's been a debate in history in real life. Uh, and to end on this, are we the baddies moment? That's a question we've all got to reckon with. I won't tell you exactly how to feel with it, but I don't think it's a question you can just throw out and ignore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely tremendous. I think that, he was so brave to choose
Yeah.
this, and it's not inauthentic to the text, it's all
Yeah.
there, right? But the focus with which he approached this story is, again, just so important today, as you said, and one of
Yeah.
the reasons to love it. In a world where our own government is actively looking to set aside the quote unquote rules of war,
Yeah.
certain decorums, ways of being in the world that even as we have conflict, try and keep us within a certain lack of savagery, as we might define it,
Yeah.
right? There's things we will and won't do even in war.
Yeah.
And more we're flirting with powers that want to throw all that away and say, no,
Yep.
might makes right. And as strong as you can be is as strong as good as you can get in the world.
Absolutely.
And to see Odysseus reckon with what it actually means when you take those social contracts, light them on fire, and try and move forward, it, things will crumble.
Yeah.
It's a loss of what actually makes us human. It's a
Mhm.
step in the wrong direction, and I'm so grateful that Nolan's willing to
Yeah.
wrestle with that in this film.
Yeah, it's such a great thing, and Chris, one of my favorite books of all time, I've probably mentioned it on the podcast before. I almost definitely brought it up back in Whaling Shall Be in All Streets, but there's this book by Chris Hedges, War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning.
Mhm.
I think it came out in, like, 2003. It's, like, an early 2000s, like, freshly post 9/11. I read this in college. Chris Hedges, a war journalist, and he is trying to, not celebrate war, but dip into how being close to war becomes ingrained in you, and you cannot separate yourself
Mm.
from it. And that's not just the people on the battlefield; those are the people trying to survive every day, the refugees, the war
Yeah.
journalists. And it's this incredibly open piece. Like he talks about himself getting into like a fist fight in the middle of an airport just because of the way his brain is still wired from being out there, being in danger. And when I read this, I was also an English major, and he loves to talk about the Odyssey and the Iliad. So I can't in my head canon, this was part of Christopher Nolan's reading list, but I just want to read this
Got
like
it.
little Chris Hedges quote. Uh, it is his hero's heart that Odysseus must learn to curb before he can return to the domestic life he left 20 years earlier. The very qualities that served him in battle defeat him in peace. These dual codes have existed perhaps since human societies were formed, and every recruit headed into war would be well advised to read the Iliad, just as every soldier returning home would be served by reading the Odyssey. No two works have come closer to chronicling the rage and consumption of war and the struggle to recover. The name Odysseus is tied to the Greek verb odousomai, which means to suffer pain.
Wow. Brilliant. And hard to argue with your idea that this is on Nolan's reading list, an informed part of his approach to this story. My goodness gracious. I love the way he uses the word hero there.
Yeah,
It's like it's a word that doesn't carry the same meaning for us today. When we think of heroes, often it's
yeah,
superheroes, or some people it's like first responders. They think of like a do-gooder, a person who's out to save the day, to save people, to do good. But a Greek hero is not a do-gooder or necessarily even a
yeah,
morally good person. A Greek hero is simply a warrior.
yeah.
He's a fighter, one who will take on great tasks and try to
Perfect.
achieve perhaps great things. But it's a
Mhm,
very different thing. And I love the way he says the hero's heart there. He doesn't
mhm.
mean some virtuous,
Mhm.
do-gooder heart that can't settle down in domestic life. No, he's talking about a raging beast,
Yeah.
a fighter, and that's an important distinction to make.
So, I love that Christopher Nolan chose to go there. Um, and Chris, if you haven't read that book, you'll love it, man.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear your thoughts when you give me a call and personally update me on your reading list. It'll be a blast. Um, but this is kind of where we get into like, I went on Letterboxd. I gave this a 4-star review. I flirted with a 4.5, but I knew there was something in my heart that I was longing for. And I think part of that was just selfishly, there were some things I would have loved to see that were fun. But if I look objectively at the choices in the film, I can understand why Nolan made the choice not to do it. It doesn't bother
Mhm.
me. For instance, like for me, the most iconic moment in the original text, it is the Cyclops sequence. Um, but in the text, Polyphemus has a voice. He can
Right.
speak, he can reason, he has a personality, he has a favorite ram in the flock. There is a lifestyle there that Odysseus is not interested in understanding. And I mean, in his defense, the Cyclops is still eating up his guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's not an option they ever get to not be gobbled up. Apart from, I guess, they didn't have to like force their way into his home and expect to be treated as guests in the Greek way.
Es especially when they themselves have been upending Zeus's law everywhere they go.
And I think the first time I did kind of like let a little sigh out in the movie is like they're escaping the cave and like I'm letting it go. They kind of threw some straw over themselves instead of actually being tied to the bottom of the sheep. And look, whatever,
Mhm.
that's fine. That doesn't bother me. And then I'm like, but here it comes. He's about to doom himself. He's going to hit the ship and he's going to say, by the way, I do have a name. It's Odysseus of Ithaca. And tell everyone that I'm the one that blinded you, motherfucker, is basically the tone.
Yeah.
And that's what sets off Poseidon. And while I understand why Nolan was trying not to invite the gods in so literally, and
Mhm.
even our girl Emily Wilson acknowledged in her review, it probably would have been hard to bring in the gods without making this feel really campy and like not what he was going for.
Yeah.
I was bummed out to see him just kind of fire an extra arrow after he'd already blinded the Cyclops. That was sort of the stand-in for that, and I was like, eh. That was one of the moments where I was like, there might have been a way to pull a little bit of this in. Like, magic was not removed from this world. I don't know. Any thought? I was kind of like, I wanted a little more like mental insight there.
Magic is apparent in this world.
Hmm.
I like that choice. He's very careful to hedge his bets on whether or not magic is real. It's apparent.
Mm,
But there are things that are no longer a part of our natural world, like this giant cyclops, right?
sure.
Um, I did not get hung up on this so much. I think, again, way less attached to the text, but even this, I was certainly expecting the classic, my name is
Yeah,
nobody.
sure.
It certainly didn't bump on it though, because realistically, yeah, there's no way I thought they were going to be tied to the bottom of the rams or sheep.
Hmm.
They're full-size adult men with gear. And, like, they just can't tie themselves to the bottom of a sheep and get carried out. That's not how it works. I've held a sheep in my own 2 arms. They're not big, burly
I mean, to be fair, he
animals.
does like tie a few sheep together. So each guy, I think, gets 3 sheep.
Yeah, sure.
I'm saying this with a smile on my face if you're listening to the audio because I am not actually suggesting that that's where Nolan should have focused his attention.
And I do think I definitely qualify the quibble because
Yeah,
it doesn't carry the same thematic weight for
yeah,
Odysseus in terms of just raw bravado, real
yeah,
foolishness in that moment in the text, right? It's
yeah,
as opposed to it's more of what the author you were just reading was getting at, that warrior
yeah,
within him can't let it go, that so many of their men were lost to this thing. So I'm gonna plug it one more time in its eye. It's just a last
yeah,
punishment now that we're free. Certainly feels like the kind of flaw that is true to this character that we are getting to know, and the kind of flaw that
yeah,
we know, having finished the film, that this character has to wrestle with. So it's a different flaw in his character that I do think works within this story, but I
yeah,
absolutely qualify that it's by no means the same experience for the character. It doesn't say the same thing about the character
yeah,
as it does in the text. I do think Polyphemus speaking for the first time and them realizing that he can
yeah,
speak,
They do
worked
acknowledge that, yeah.
worked perfectly in this world because again,
Mhm.
they didn't even consider it before they just made this thing an enemy, a mindless beast to be survived or overcome or conquered.
I
They don't
will
even
say
consider it.
I will say that Wail of Agony was the single best thing in the sound design for me.
Did you think so?
Holy crap. I thought it was incredible.
It was very, very good. It's all
Yeah.
disturbing.
Oh, yeah.
But it's if we're doing that, the plucking of the bowstring,
Sure,
the
yeah.
harp note with that is just chef's kiss.
Yeah.
Perfect cinema.
We're going to take a quick break from our conversation at this time. To broaden that conversation, Kris and I invited a few of our great podcasting friends to weigh in with some of the reasons why they like and particularly loved Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. Please hear what they have to say now.
Hello, Media Lit and fellow podlings. This is Bill George from the Should I Go See It podcast. Randy and Kris, thank you so much for inviting my thoughts and insight on the Odyssey. I'll start by just saying I think it was phenomenal. I think it was a phenomenal achievement. There is a lot to discuss in terms of the technical aspect of the film and all the practical work that was done and how it looks and how it sounds and all those things. But anything that would be said about that has already been said about that, so I don't need to get too in-depth on it. A couple things that I will point out before we get into sort of the telling of the story itself is I did really love Matt Damon in the role. I think it was perfect casting. I can't picture anyone else. I think Nolan made a brilliant choice by bringing him in as someone who has instant relatability. And I think there's that immediate buy-in from the audience to care about him and this story and his trials and tribulations. So I think Damon, top-notch pick. So I want to highlight that for sure. And I will also say that from a technical aspect, the formatting I don't think is as relevant as people are saying. I think it's a little overblown. I think it is a nice to have, but not a need. I saw the movie twice, once in large format and once in a regular theater. And I honestly liked the second experience better, partially from a sound perspective. It wasn't as loud. Sometimes those large format theaters like to crank it uncomfortably loud. And it's honestly, you don't know what you don't know. Instead of watching the movie and being concerned about what you're missing from the frame, you just end up being engrossed in what is on the screen and what is in the frame. So I think if people are waiting to see it because they only want to see it in a particular experience, I would say just go see the movie. See the movie, whatever the format. As far as the movie itself and the story they told, which I know is more the bread and butter of Media Lit and diving into the details. As a non-scholar, I only really remember the cliff notes of the story, so I thought it was a fantastic adaptation. I thought it hit on all the exciting things that Nolan knew would make for an entertaining movie, and he was still able to hammer home a message and get a strong thesis into the film. On the Media Lit episode that we all did together, we explored Nolan's filmography and his growth, and we compared Memento to Oppenheimer, and sort of from a filmmaking level, we kind of watched his evolution. And now I think you could do an entire episode on Oppenheimer and Odyssey from a thematic level. And that was really what was most interesting to me about this movie, is how both Oppenheimer and Odyssey reach the same conclusion. It's just wildly different stories to get there. So I really was fascinated taking in the parallels between those two films. I adored the movie. I can't wait to watch it at least one more time in theaters, maybe multiple. I am particularly glad that it is a big movie that people are talking about and going to and getting others to go to. It's driving a lot of discussion and cinematic discourse, and it's not part of a franchise or a larger plan from a studio. So that's one of the other main aspects that I have just loved about watching this film come out and all the reactions and all the discussion. It's just been really, really invigorating as a cinephile, and I'm sure you guys feel that way as well. So those are my main thoughts. Overall, I thought it was absolutely exceptional. I there were a couple little quibbles I may have had, or I bumped on a couple pieces of the language use the first time I saw it. But the second time I saw it, a lot of that kind of just washed away, and I was able to just bask in the movie itself without the weight of expectations of that first viewing. And so that second viewing, it really started to hit home for me, and it started to kind of tick up my list of Nolan favorites. Very excited to hear what you guys have to say about it, and thanks again for inviting my thoughts. Make sure to follow on Instagram at Should I Go See It.
Hey everyone, I'm Case Aiken, and I just want to thank Randy and Chris for inviting me on to talk about The Odyssey for a minute. I just want to gush about a few things because I enjoyed this movie a lot. Now, I did see this movie as the first night out I had with my wife after we had our second child, so definitely take it with a grain of salt. I was primed to enjoy this movie. But you know what? I was a classics major, and I enjoyed this a lot. I thought that the rhythm of the piece, the directorial style of it, and some of this may have been the IMAX cameras having restrictions on how long the takes could be, but just the general moving from scene to scene and so forth, did a really good job of conveying the nature of the poetry. I thought that was excellent. I thought that the use of the sea people, I really want to hammer home this one. The sea people thing, I think, was really interesting and contributed to the larger point of this movie. I think it creates some of the sort of record scratch moments for people who are really into the history and the mythology of it all. But linking this to the sea people, which were famously a group of probably refugees that were traveling because of different crises that occurred towards the ends of the Bronze Age. But we have evidence, written record of them attacking towns in Egypt. And that's where a lot of people think that the Bronze Age collapse really stems from. There's a whole complicated story about what actually occurred in terms of the collapse and so forth. And it's not all the sea people. They were probably a byproduct of it. They might have been the Greeks. That part is also there. It gets into the weirdness of trying to square the circle that is the mythology of things like the Odyssey and the Iliad with what we actually know for sure happened at the ends of the Bronze Age. But I think this movie is doing a good job of raising a conversation about it. This is a movie with a thesis statement. It is a movie about conflict, about war, about basic humanity, and it is telling a story about how actions have consequences. And they are using a trickster hero to highlight that, because every time he thinks he's gotten one over on the gods, he finds out that he has screwed himself in a different way. And that is part and parcel of the Odyssey, going all the way back to Homer. And it is conveyed here really well. Obviously, there is so much to shout out in this movie, and I don't have enough time to go over everything. The performances are great. The practical effects are incredible in this movie. The instrumentation, the fact that they had to source and reconstruct ancient instruments to do the orchestral score is so cool. It's just a really cool movie with a lot of trickery going on to make scenes that people have been talking about for thousands of years come alive, and that's really cool. And on that note, I just want to thank Randy and Chris again for giving me a platform for which I could gush about this movie for a few minutes. So thank you guys, and on to the next person.
Hi everyone, it's Heather Stewart here. You can find me on Heather J. Stewart on all the socials and lots of my content on the Revisionist Almanac channel. I'm also, disclaimer here, massive Nolan fan, and really just a couple of minutes to talk about this latest film, kind of impossible. I'll give it a go. So yes, I obviously saw The Odyssey on the opening day. Yes, I took time off work to be at the first screening in the massive Dolby Cinema in town where I live. Unfortunately, no IMAX near here. And yes, I've seen it again. So first things first, I should say I'm not a massive fan of Sword and Sandals films, so I wasn't really expecting this one to be amongst my very favourite Nolans, which it wasn't, which is probably, quite frankly, more a testimony to the strength of his filmography. However, the achievement and the scope are massive, and the 2 hours, 52 minutes just flew by, both times. I actually thought at times that the pacing was a little bit too fast, and some of the epic scenes from the book, which I've read, such as the Great Whirlpool, the Six-Headed Monster, they felt a little bit rushed and a little bit half-baked, which gave the film a slightly disjointed feel. Didn't hinder my enjoyment, though. In only a few minutes, like I said, it is hard to touch on everything, so I'm just going to talk about one of my favorite scenes, which was really explored in full. And I'm delighted we spent so much time with it as the film reached its climax. You can say what you like about Nolan, but he really does know how to end a film. Anyway, that scene is where Odysseus strings the bow, and the audience, we know he can, we know he's going to, but there's still that moment of doubt when he first doesn't, when the suitors laugh at this beggar, when Telemachus, who does know it's his dad right now, seems to doubt, and when Penelope, who is wanting to believe it's him, I think she does know, turns away with a tear. And yet, and I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it, on the second attempt he succeeds, and the plucking of the string perfectly aligns with Göransson's score, as it has done in previous moments throughout the film. Then he fires straight through the axes, and the audience just erupted both times. And no matter how well you know the story, you still feel that tension, and you still feel that relief and the triumph, which is augmented by the lighting, by the score, the blocking. And then, of course, it leads into the epic fight with the suitors, and ultimately Penelope and Odysseus reunited, watched by their son. Another incredible scene, just from a pure shot perspective, is the fall of Troy. In particular, I want to highlight the opening of the gates of Troy and Agamemnon just standing there all in black with the fire and the lighting maximizing his aura. Wow. Shout out as well to the fourth wall break from Zendaya, the cut to the Athena statue being beheaded. Not just for that shot, but also for what it signifies in the story, or in Nolan's version of it, and the overarching message he wants to convey. And the more I think about it, I really do think that the Odyssey fits naturally into Nolan's usual themes and his tropes. So it's about a man consumed by a problem that he can't let go of, trying to get home to his family, obsession, time, loss, guilt, being separated from your children. We move backwards and forwards through memories and stories. And I think there's moments as well when neither Odysseus nor the audience are entirely sure what's real. So, although there's cyclopses, there's monsters, there's gods, there's horror elements, it still feels surprisingly at home alongside other films in his body of work. So I have, as I said, now seen the film twice, and really it's incredibly rewatchable, and I can't wait to actually see it again and pick up even more details that I'm still convinced I've missed quite a lot. And, The Odyssey is a massive epic, and you probably can't ever really fully do it justice, but I think Chris Nolan absolutely really did nail it, and he pulled it off as I kind of knew he would. And he's really reinforced his position as my absolute favorite director.
Folks, thank you so much for sticking around to hear from some of our very smart and very insightful friends. Please remember to reach out and let us know how you felt about the movie at media.slash.lit@gmail.com. But until then, it's back to the conversation from your regular hosts. I have one other question on the hero's heart, because that was my main goal tonight, was this hero's heart. And that is, there's the Polyphemus moment. But I think there was one other thing where Christopher Nolan was in a tough spot, because I don't know exactly where the correct line is for the suggestion I am going to make. I felt like Odysseus got off the hook a little bit easy for his own violence, the raping and pillaging of his men. Even when he does acknowledge it in their first stop after Troy, they kind of cut to oh, you guys hid from us. You could have just welcomed us. It was kind of your fault, right? But it's very much no, we went and we raped and we pillaged and we took their women, and we took their supplies. And I wanted to see more of how he had fallen. And also, it didn't fully sit with me when we get to the revelation that he has his epiphany moment during the sack of Troy. I think I might have liked a timeline where we got to see a bit more of proud, cunning, I'm the shit Odysseus, and maybe see the epiphany come a little bit later, even with that same sort of flashback to Troy, but make him a more active participant, because it kind of turns into feeling like he's just watching everyone else.
Mhm.
And I think I wanted to see what he's capable of and really earn that moment where he rides off to atone for what he has done. But that actually ties into the gods and goddesses because I also agree it was smart to veer away from that. But Odysseus's relationship with Athena is so much fun. Watching those two mess with each other, joke with each other. There's this whole game, recognized game vibe between them. Like they are buddies. To see her taking the forms of different people. I miss that energy.
Mhm.
And at first I was really bummed with Athena because I was like, this is not the Athena character that I know and love. I'm not seeing anything that she loves from Odysseus. We ultimately get the revelation that she is more of a reflection of his own mind. She is this presence. She is this memory. And then it makes sense within the movie. But where I most bemoaned the presence of the gods, it was in the Calypso sequence.
Oh,
I'm going to hit you with one more quick passage, and then I'm pretty much at the end of what I want to say. Um, I kind of called out not loving the whole Calypso set and storyline was one of my weakest moments in this
Mhm.
movie. I love him with the lotus flower. He's trying not to remember home. He's too scared to go back. He's not ready to go back. But they missed out on so much with Calypso. Fresh off my read, I was so pumped to see the Calypso set. I was thinking of our guy Tom Bombadil.
yeah.
Just check this out. Let's see. Inside, she was singing and weaving with a shuttle made of gold. Her voice was beautiful. Around the cave, a luscious forest flourished, alder, poplar, and scented cypress. It was full of wings. Birds nested there, but hunted out at sea. The owls, the hawks, the gulls with gaping beaks. A ripe and verdant wine hung thick with grapes and stretched to coil around her cave. 4 springs spurted with sparkling water as they laced with crisscross currents. Intertwined together, the meadow softly bloomed with celery and violets. This is Hermes, gazed around in wonder and joy. It sights to please even a god.
Mhm.
And because in the text, Odysseus hasn't forgotten home. She's keeping him there, but she's offering him immortality.
Right.
Stay with me, Charlize Theron, on this beautiful island for
Right.
eternity. And furthermore, she's a bit more fun in the book. When Hermes shows up to send down the word from the higher ups, like Odysseus has got to go, lady. She's like fine, but she has this whole great thing, like, yeah, so like all the male gods, they can lay with any maiden they want, but one of us tries to do it, and all of a sudden it's a it's a
Yeah.
problem. So I love that Calypso energy. I missed that. I wanted that set. I know it wasn't really the story he was trying to tell, but like I think seeing him go toe to toe with some of those gods and then question those things, I was missing it. Some of it veers more towards what I personally wanted, and some of it I think could have served the story.
Exactly. It's two different conversations, right? Did Nolan succeed in doing what he was trying to
Mhm.
do versus did you get what you were hoping to get?
Yeah.
Two very different things, right?
Yeah.
For me, I actually think, especially given the story that Nolan was trying to tell, it is like perfect subversion to
Mhm.
not even attempt any version of that set, but instead a mostly barren kind of sandy, desolate beach
Mhm.
where there's not but rags on them blowing in the wind and sort of bits of his wrecked ship. All of that paradise is like
Yeah.
it's part of that unreliable narrator of Odysseus, right? It's all in
Yeah.
his mind. I love the idea that no, all of that is actually just in the lotus flower. It's
Yeah.
just in this like drug that lets him escape and hide from all the trauma and hide from the hate he has for himself at this point. So I
Yeah.
thought if you either doing it
Yeah.
and and really doing it and making more of the story about those set pieces.
Yeah.
Or if not, I love the choice to say, okay, I'm going to go the other way. How can I still make this honest to the story,
Yeah.
but fit the world that I'm doing? That's what makes him such a brilliant
Yeah.
filmmaker, the ability to do exactly that. And then when Calypso is clocking those thunder strikes
Mhm.
as Zeus is speaking to her, I
Oh,
thought it was
yeah.
the perfect way to represent that little tete-a-tete, that communication between her and Zeus
Beautiful.
in this world. Yeah, and going back to what you're saying about Odysseus and that heart of a hero, it ties into that what I was saying about the
Yeah.
unreliable narrator. Part of I don't know necessarily that he did have his moment of revelation there in Troy. That's where trauma began
Mm-hmm.
and the shell shock maybe began to set in. But we see he goes on from there, and he still has a lot of growing to do and more to experience before he's ready to really like lose himself into the depths of despair and trauma and the post-traumatic stress disorder that comes with wartime.
Yeah.
But he's now telling the story from the other end of the experience.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to me that as he's representing it, it is not so much about his action as much as it is about the things he was seeing and experiencing and watching. I do think I experienced that line you highlighted where they kind of throw away like, oh, they could have just welcomed us. I thought that was perfect because maybe, they're making excuses and letting themselves off the hook. But if that worked on anybody in the audience, that's the audience's fault. Because in my opinion, that's the language of an abuser. That is the telltale sign of a person who is inflicting harm on somebody else and expecting them to just like, why didn't you just comply?
Yeah.
It would have gone so much better for you. So that pinged perfectly for me. And then later it'll be Cersei who challenges him about his own men, saying, do you think they only did it because you ordered it? And that signals to us, the audience, oh yeah, like these guys weren't being reprimanded. He wasn't fighting his men to stop this stuff. He was commanding them to go do these things. Yeah. So I don't know that necessarily Odysseus gets off the hook so much, but the film isn't interested in any characters giving it to him. So it's got to be all in Matt's performance. It's got to be all in that final speech on the steps of his own home.
Beautiful. All right. Last point from me.
Yep.
A little bit of a critique. The thing I buckled on the most script-wise, because mostly I liked the script, I got sick of how many times I heard them say the term Zeus's law. I didn't like the term that they chose. I thought it was a little bit... something about the way they were phrasing that felt so unnatural, and it made it seem so like black and white and clear versus some really movable goalposts for how these rules of hospitality apply to different people. But I love that, because if you were ever bored reading this book in high school, it's because you see Telemachus and Odysseus go to like a million palaces, and you get like 2 pages of like, and they brought out the silver bowls to wash their hands and anointed them with oils and wrapped them in a, this type of tunic with fringe and a belt made of the finest. And like, it gets old. But Nolan made this Zeus's law like the centerpiece. I think this movie would be way better if at some point, one time, we got to see like a real like welcoming, like let's see this ritual play out. Someone arrives, they are greeted, they are fed, they are clothed, they are entertained, they are then asked questions, and they share their story. I wish we had to linger in that once, and then if they had then pulled out a little more of Eumaeus' story, John Leguizamo. If you haven't read the book recently, you probably didn't know he was the swineherd. Contrast that at the end, he's the first person to welcome Odysseus, and he gives him everything he has. He follows that pattern as a peasant would follow it, including the clothes off of his back on a cold night. And then he goes to sleep closer to the pigs in the field. Yeah. Like, I would have seen those, and I would have absolutely cut the whole assassination attempt side plot. That did not work for me.
I feel like that's Nolan making a Nolan film and giving it momentum, and it worked very much for me. It was the perfect moment for them to connect and have that. They don't know who they are yet. They're in such close proximity, and there's the tension of that's his dad. Don't you know that's your dad? And he knows you're his son, but you don't know that's your dad. I did catch that was the swineherder. I did like that Penelope knows his name even after it's been challenged. Yeah. Like, come on. You don't think that Telemachus, that the visit to Sparta was some example of some of that hospitality and what it looks like to be received as a guest at this time?
That reception felt so aggressive to me. I wanted more of a Tom Bombadil vibe.
Okay.
Like, I think we were missing some of the Tom Bombadil of this story, to speak in media lit terms. That being said, I'm ready to wrap up this conversation, Kris. I think with all the things I pointed out that I missed and loved from the books, I'm willing to concede all of them to Nolan, a director I love and trust. The only one like I can't fully let go is I think just a little more time seeing that process once or twice would have like lifted it up another level for me.
Do you think that would have required more
Yeah.
flashbacks? Because I think we are meant to understand, especially by the end of the film, that we're living in a Greece where that has been broken. That doesn't really exist anymore. In fact, the first thing we're introduced to is a perversion of that, with these suitors just lingering in the halls and expecting a feast every night. So I do think we're meant to understand that we're in a world where, yeah, it's not really happening anymore. So maybe it would have required more of a flashback, a different film structure to give us some sense of that. I know in the epic, it's obviously still quite present in the world, but the epic wasn't keying in on this theme as closely as Nolan was with his story. So I understand why this adaptation chose not to make that a priority, I suppose. Not necessarily to leave it out on purpose, but not to make it a priority.
But on the flip side, I loved bringing Sign-On into the story. Elliot Page, phenomenal.
He crushed.
Like, honestly,
blood in the mouth in the underworld. That's the delivery of those lines.
Because that's a character that exists in mythology. In mythology, Sign-On is in on the trick. Is still killed, but is there is another deceptor. But to make that personal, to bring it back home to Ithaca. To give us some stakes with those suitors that are shorthand for us to understand the emotional stakes. That was one of my favorite adaptive choices in the film. And
to tie that back to the suitors in such a particular way into the perversion of that Zeus's law happening back home is such a wise stroke.
Shout out to Anne Hathaway. I thought she captured so many shades of Penelope, who's an enigma in the book, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of the scholarly discussion of this story is like, what does she know? When does she know it? What does she want from Odysseus? What does she not want from Odysseus? What does her love of Odysseus look like? She gave us so many of those shades. She was probably the strongest performance in the film for me overall.
Empty Throne, that was brilliant.
Yeah, she was wonderful. And John Leguizamo, absolutely wonderful as Eumaeus. Even if I would have loved to see a couple other sides of him as well, I loved every second we got with him. Yeah. And this was a great movie. I'm so happy it exists, and I'm so happy you were willing to chat with me about it tonight, so I could voice some of this stuff. Kris, it was really helpful for me to hear how inspiring it was for you to just really be able to center this story as a reflection of the world you are living in now, and you helped me capture some of the beauty of this film. I hope there's something I brought into the conversation that's also going to enrich your appreciation for this film and discussion moving forward.
I pick up that Emily Wilson adaptation, that's for sure. Yeah, very, very interested in that. Of course, buddy. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me about this. I knew you were going to want to once you finally got around to seeing it, so I was patiently waiting. And grateful to have had my chance to celebrate some of what I thought was so fantastic about this. Matt Damon had better get his Oscar for this one, is all I'm saying.
Beautiful. Well, folks, thank you so much for joining us here tonight. You know where to find us, but as always, we would love a like and follow on Spotify, on YouTube, wherever else you get your podcasts. We want to hear your thoughts about The Odyssey at media.slash.lit@gmail.com. Let us know how much you loved The Odyssey. Let us know whether or not you buckled a little bit on any of the adaptive choices. Let Kris or myself know how wrong or how right we were, and we'll be happy to hear it either way, to be fully honest. But thank you so much for adding us to your list of Odyssey discourse.
Yeah, thank you, folks. As Randy said, you know where to find us. We're on the Instagrams, we're on all the places. Follow the pod, leave us a like, and thanks for listening.